This movie talk radio episode is an excerpt from Dick's live stage show, Hooray for Hollywood. In it, he talks about the golden age of Hollywood, which took off pretty much when the talkies started. Enjoy.
Wait a minute. You ain't heard nothing yet. Anybody know what line that film came from? Anybody? The Jazz Singer. Famous line, and the actor was Al Jolson. Yes. That film marked the beginning of the golden age of Hollywood. And it lasted for over 20 years. And during that period, there were over 83 million people were going to the motion picture theaters once a week. That's a lot. And there were 7,500 films produced during that era. And the studios thrived. They gave audiences films that had a positive effect on them during the Great Depression and World War II. They produced a wide range of film genres like lavish musicals, epic costume adventures, mysteries, drama, romance, comedy, documentaries, those daring cliffhangers, and of course, animated films like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. The audiences laughed with the comedy of Bob Hope and W.C. Fields and the Marx Brothers, and they fell in love with a curly-haired little girl named Shirley Temple. She just recently passed away this last February. She was 85 years old. During that golden age of Hollywood, studios were run as corporate businesses. And in order to keep control of their production and distribution costs, they had, on production costs, they had all the actors and actresses and writers, producers, directors, technicians were all under salary contract. And in order for the studios to save money on distribution costs, the 5 major studios owned all of the motion picture theaters across America. I thought that was an interesting phenomenon. And the smaller studios that didn't own theaters had to negotiate with the bigger studios in order to get their films screened. But those were the great days. Some of the most powerful studio in Hollywood. Anybody know which the most powerful studio was during the Golden Age? MGM, yes. They had more stars than they're in heavens, was their mottos. They had more stars than any other studio. They were one of the first studios to produce films in Technicolor. And they produced the first film in color to win an Academy Award for Best Picture. 1939. Anybody? Gone with the Wind. Gone with the Wind. Great film. Anyway, the golden age of Hollywood was a time when there were many, many great films produced. And according to the American Film Institute, the year 1939 was the year that Hollywood produced more of the greatest films of all time in that one year than in any other year in film history. Films like Gone with the Wind, Goodbye, Mr. Chips. What? Wuthering Heights. Destry Rides Again, Gunga Din, Roaring Twenties, Stagecoach, Ninotchka, Hunchback of Notre Dame. The list goes on and on. Another great film of that year was The Wizard of Oz. There have been many political films, great political films produced over the years. One of my favorites was one of the scenes here. I think was one of the greatest of all time, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Great performance by Jimmy Stewart. It starred Gene Autry, Thomas Mitchell, and Claude Rains. Great movie, 1939. During the golden age of Hollywood, there were many great screen legends that came from that era. Who were some of the leading male stars of the golden age? Anybody? Cary Grant, Clark Gable. Laurence Olivier, yes. How about James Stewart, Cagney, Humphrey Bogart, William Powell? Many. Same thing with the women. How about some famous women stars of that era? Betty Davis, Katharine Hepburn, Lana Turner, Carole Lombard, Myrna Loy, Claudette Colbert, Marlene Dietrich, the list goes on and on. Now, here's one for you. Who's the king and queen of Hollywood? They were crowned in 1938. The king and queen of Hollywood. Clark Gable and Myrna Loy. And you say, how did that come about? Well, you see, one evening in 1938, there was a dinner party in Hollywood, and it was attended by many celebrities. And Clark Gable was one of them, and one of his best friends, Spencer Tracy, was in attendance. And Spence said to Clark, he said, you know, Clark, you're the king of Hollywood because you've been on the silver screen with all those leading ladies. And he said, that's a bunch of bull. I'm just a poor slob from Ohio that happened to be at the right place at the right time. Well, Ed Sullivan, a noted newspaper columnist, found out about that. So he wanted to find out who the king and queen was. So he did a poll in his newspaper column. Over 2 million people voted Clark Gable, Myrna Loy. Oh, the defining moment, which was the event that ended the golden age of Hollywood, happened in 1948. Does anyone have any idea what happened in 1948 that ended it? Well, it was a Supreme Court ruling and a case versus United States versus Paramount. And the Supreme Court ruling was the studios had a monopoly on production and distribution. And they forced the studios to sell off all of their motion picture theaters. And so that marked the end. It took a few years before it really made its transition, but that golden age was just such a grand time.